Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the 47th TESOL Italy National Convention. We have to apologize because due to technical problems, the speaker of this session can't present a live session, and she sent us a pre-recorded one, and she is available to answer your question. So you will have in the chat box her email to address your question if there are any. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, that is Dr. Lin Pan, who will be sharing her expertise in this session, whose title is English to Realize the Chinese Dream. Lin is an associate professor, the vice chair of English department of Beijing Normal University, and the e-book author for English as a Global Language in China. So the title is Deconstructing the Ideological Discourse of English in Language Education, and it is published by Springer. She also co-edited Mandarin Chinese Teacher Education in an issue that is Issues and Solutions by UCL IOE Press. So if you have any question, as I just said, please, you can write them directly to the email of Dr. Lin. So Lin, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon to friends in Italy. It's my honor to join your conference. Hello everyone from all over the world. If you happen to be here watching this presentation of mine, I'll be talking about using English to realize the Chinese dream, the political economic ideologies of language planning in China. So my talk is divided into 5 parts. First of all, I'm going to introduce the background to you. Then I'm going to explain the political economic ideologies of language planning in China and globally in general. And then I will be talking about English education in China's shifting political and economic context to share with you some background knowledge. And mainly, I will be analyzing in detail the political economic ideologies in 2017 and 2022 English curriculum standards in China. And finally, I will reach a conclusion. So it's going to be around 30 minutes. First of all, I will say something about the introduction. I'll list it 3 points that I'm going to talk about: the Chinese dream, the political economic perspective, the Chinese foreign language education policy. These are some of the key points, right, guiding my research or this piece of research. So first of all, let me say something about the Chinese dream. Okay, so before COVID, China has outpaced the US as the largest annual contributor to world growth since 2010, and it has become the second largest economy in the world. So some people have estimated that by 2030, China will have outtaken or overtaken the US as the world's largest economy. And other people speculate that China's ascent or China's rise may be the prelude to a new cyclical transition phase from one global hegemon to another, or perhaps from one global language to another. But how did China view its changing role globally? In 2012, Xi Jinping came to power, and soon after he was in power, he just put forward the idea of Chinese dream, which is, in other words, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And it means to build a well-off society and a fully developed nation. So the paper explores how this kind of a changed political and economic mission of the Chinese dream, of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, has influenced the state's ideologies towards English, and how these ideologies have affected China's language planning. Okay, So the perspective that I adopted in this piece of research, that is the political economic perspectives. Why I choose political economic perspective? Because it constitutes a fundamental blind spot in applied linguistics and in language policy analysis. Therefore, it's fundamental to this paper that political economy is a crucial perspective for exploring how language policies interrelate with political forces and economic activities. And for my research, I mainly choose two foreign language education policies to share with you. One is the 2017 version of the English curriculum standards at the senior high education level, and that is for students aged between 16 to 18 in general. And another language policy is the 2022 version of the English curriculum standards at the compulsory education level, that is for students aged 6 to 15 in general. So later I will explain in more detail why I choose these policies. But just give you some background, they are the most recent and the most influential foreign language education policies guiding China. More about the theoretical framework or some of the key theoretical concepts used in my research. So 3 points that I would like to illustrate. One is the political economy in the modern world system. Another concept is the ideology, and third one is language planning and foreign language education policies. So I adopted political economy as the theoretical lens because it's a kind of a interdisciplinary lens to explore how individuals and their social institutional activities and social system interrelate with one another. This paper is to examine the global spread of English in China, and therefore I suggest that one needs to take into account the global spread of capital, the accumulation of trade relations and the economic competitions by various states in the world system. So this is to see the political and economic ideologies. So why using world system as a kind of political economic theoretical framework? Because world system developed by Wallerstein, world system lens is a political economic perspective that views the whole world as an interconnected system with competing states engaged in the interregional and transnational division of labor. So for those who are not very familiar with world system, I'm going to give you just some more detailed analysis, even though, or introduction, even though I will still say my introduction is a very oversimplification of Wallerstein's idea, right? Because Wallerstein developed a 3-volume series or book series to explain modern world system. Well, I could only offer 1 page or 1 PowerPoint page to illustrate the idea. So it's very basic, right? So if you look at this page and you see the 3 circles overlapping each other, you can see that this is a kind of a modern world system. It's a kind of interrelated or interstate system divided into core, semi-periphery, and periphery. And different states occupy different positions in this interrelated system. So states in the system, they try to exercise their authority and compete with each other and try to occupy a more central position like this in the world system. Right. So just give you an example. For example, China, in around 1840, it used to reside a more central position in the world system, and U.S. a more marginal position, right? And then in the past 150 years, China actually moved outward to a more peripheral position, and the United States moved in to a more central position in the world system. But recently we see that China has gained more economic power and is trying to gain more political power, and then is moving towards the center of the system. all the state's power is driven and constrained by actors both above the state level and below the state level. So that is not to say that all the states are trying to gain, well, of course, all the states hope to gain a more central position in the world system, but their powers is constrained by some actors above their state level and below the state level. The powers above the state level, for example, the transnational organizations, right, and then the competing powers, between nations, and below the state level might be some civil organizations, for example. Okay. So according to Blommaert, to maintain power and authority, the state usually carefully gains consent and win the hearts of the minds of its people from below the state level by waging what Gramsci calls a type of soft power, a complete dominance of society in the fields of cultural, spirituality, and ideas and science. And of course, in my paper, I would say by language planning, that is a kind of a power, okay, that the state is trying to exert on the hearts and minds of the people, and to win the hearts and minds of the people. Okay. So something about ideology. What I mean by ideology, I follow Blommaert by saying that ideology is a complex combination of ideas, often with political purposes. Ideologies are usually embedded in codified statements such as standards and regulations, aiming to instill ideas about society in the minds of members of that society. Right, and of course, language planning and language policies is another kind of a codified statement. And those in power will benefit from keeping the various interpretations of the ideology as similar as possible, and from obliterating or censoring those that deviating from theirs. And therefore, the paper argues that foreign language education policies are tools to keep the various ideologies towards foreign languages as close together as possible via teaching and learning. Okay, on language planning and foreign language education policy. So foreign language education policies is a kind of outcome of language planning. They help sustain national, political, economic, and social needs, and reflect states' ideologies towards foreign languages by imposing principles and regulations on language teaching. And therefore, the paper contends that understanding what state ideologies are embedded in foreign language education policies require a more thorough understanding of how states interact in the economically and politically connected world system. Okay. So to understand, or before my analysis, I want to give you more background about the Chinese context so that you will better understand my analysis later. So I'm going to talk about English education in China's shifting political and economic context. I divide it into two parts. That's before 2012 and after 2012. Why before 2012? Because at around 2012, or just the period before that, China has embraced English unprecedentedly. And China claimed to have 4 million English learners by 2010. And the English education started at the first year of primary school. So that is to say, when students just entered school, they will study English. Okay, there is a very detailed explanation of the foreign language education policy or foreign language or English education in China in my book, English as a Global Language in China, Deconstructing the Ideological Discourses of English in Language Education, published in 2015, okay, with Springer. But after 2012, things have changed. As I mentioned that in 2012, Xi Jinping, as the president of China, just came, or general secretary, right? And he came to power, and soon after that, he proposed or he put forward the idea of Chinese dream, that is the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, right? And it was proposed and promoted as the political ideology of China's leadership. And the ultimate goal of it is to transform China into both a major economic and political power in the world system. And Xi Jinping further elaborated that the Chinese dream is not about individual glory. It's not like the American dream. It's unique in the Chinese context. It's not about individual glory, but collective efforts. So the aim of it is to link individual aspiration with that of the nation, to converge the value of the market economy with state nationalism. And therefore, the national rejuvenation will create a great Chinese nation state with unified ideology for state governance. So this is the background, and it's very important for understanding the recent foreign language education policy in China. And therefore, from then on, we see that there is a change of status in English. For example, in education sectors, okay, in 2013, English was proposed to withdraw from Gaokao. Gaokao is the national entrance examination for college and universities. So it's the most important educational examination in China. And it was English was in Gaokao for in the past decades from 1980. But then it was proposed that English should gradually withdraw from Gaokao around 2010 and 2012, right? But actually still the effort was made in vain because, English did withdraw 1 year from Beijing, Gaokao in Beijing, but just people complain about it. So from sub-state sector, there were kind of voices against this measure. So it was back, right? But still we see the plan, we see the deliberate plan of de-emphasizing English subject in the national education examination, right? And another thing is, in the newly released English education curriculum, the 2022 English education curriculum, English classes were reduced, all right, from the curriculum. So it used to be that there were 3 subjects of equal importance: Chinese, math, and English, right, for many years, several decades, right? But now the status of English was reduced from the English curriculum, right, from, say, primary school level. And that's in educational sector. From social sector, we see that the English road size in China, the number of English road sites was reduced in 2022, all of a sudden, just before the Winter Olympic Games in Beijing. And this is in sharp contrast with the previous event, that's the Summer Olympic Games in 2008. If you remember, I just mentioned around 2008-2010, English was with unprecedented status in China. So when Beijing was hosting Summer Olympic Games, there was a kind of national movement, right, to standardize all the road signs in a kind of bilingual way, Chinese and English. But then at this current decade, this year actually, so when Winter Olympic Games were coming to Beijing, and the bilingual road signs were reduced to a kind of monolingual way, which is very interesting signal. And we see the state's deliberate plan to minimize the importance of English and the foreground the importance of its own language and national identity. Okay, so it's very interesting. So the research question is, what state ideologies towards English are embedded in the current English education language education, the Chinese foreign language education policies, and how they reflect the political and economic concerns of the state in its interaction in the modern world system and in fulfilling the collective dream of rejuvenation. So I am going to talk about the these kind of political economic ideologies in from three perspectives. That's English as a tool for communication and for promoting Chinese culture, and for cultivating students' patriotism, and for developing students' core competence to improve the foreign language competence of the state. Okay, I need to just watch the time. Okay. So again, this is the major part of analysis, but I just want to give you some more idea on the English curriculum standard that I will use. Okay, I said that they are the most recent and the most influential ones in China. But why they are the most recent and most influential ones? Because they were developed soon after the Chinese Dream was promoted, and then they were supposed to represent the core theme of the Chinese Dream, that's rejuvenation of the great nation of China. Okay, now let's look at the first point, English as a tool for communication and for promoting the Chinese culture. So I'll give you a few seconds to read the 2017 English curriculum standard and just see what is highlighted there. Okay, as I just underlined, you see that in this statement, English is a kind of a lingua franca and a kind of indispensable communication tool, right? And I will come back to this slide and to see what's also important. But let's look at 2022. The policy item is still, it's in the same way English is pointed out as a communication tool. But further to the idea of communication tool, let's just come back to the 2017 English curriculum standard. Besides being a communication tool, English also shoulders another mission, that is to spread the Chinese culture. And also we come back to the 2022 English curriculum standards. Besides a communication tool, it also plays an important role for China to go global, to make the world understand China, and to build a community with a shared future for the mankind. Right. So we see that, from these two these several items listed in 2017 and 2022 English curriculum standards, they are very they are not the same as their previous counterparts, because in 2001 the policy listed that learning of English is to get to know the cultural difference between China and the other countries, and in 2003 the learning of English is to get familiar with the Chinese culture and traditions, and therefore to change the mission of the learning English from making China known and understood to making China global, right? So that is the change. Now I turn to the analysis for this part. We see that the ideology of learning and teaching English has changed, right? Well, not exactly totally changed, but we see that it's moving from a global means of inter-community communication to additional role of spreading Chinese culture, values, and ideals. But why there is such a change? If we look at China's, or if we relate it to China's history, okay, and we'll understand that in the previous decades, China's main mission was to integrate into the world system as a global community member, to a member of the global community, right? But recently, with its economic role, the greater economic role, okay, it's a kind of ambition is no longer just be a member, but be a major player in the global community, in the world system, right? And therefore it's important to promote the global understanding of China and Chinese culture, and to expand Chinese global influence. So we see that in China and in the two foreign language policies, that the role of English is still very much instrumental, right? So there is a kind of instrumental ideology of learning English. But actually, this kind of instrumental ideology is changed in form, but not in essence. It's still as a tool for promoting Chinese culture. It's no longer for, say, communication, for the function of communication, facilitation of communication, but also for promoting the Chinese culture, value, and ideals. So the Chinese foreign language education policies are derived, we say that the Chinese foreign language education policies are derived from the central government's construction of the national interest to increase its strength and competitiveness in the modern world system. Okay, and we see that the state political economic consideration is a crucial factor in planning and in making policies. So that's the first point that I want to make. Now let's look at the second point, okay, to cultivate students' patriotism. Again, I will give you a few seconds to read the policy item before we analyze together. Okay, so in the two foreign language education policy, we see cultural awareness is emphasized. And both English curriculum documents emphasize that the development of the cultural awareness helps students enhance their national identity and patriotism, increase their cultural confidence, and cultivate a sense of community with a shared future of mankind, and to learn to enhance self-cultivation and function properly in society, and thus become educated and responsible persons. So this is to fulfill actually the one of the general objectives of English curriculum standard, that is to cultivate socialist builders and successors with devotion to Chinese culture, international vision, and intercultural communication skills. All right, so learning English is not transcending cultural boundaries. It's no longer transcending cultural boundaries, but to express their Chinese identities. So it's more about cultivating their Chineseness, right? And to cultivate their Chinese points of view in an international context for building, maintaining, and protecting nationalist and socialist values. Again, I want to relate this to something in Japan in the 1990s. So it's very similar to Japan in that in the 1990s, internationalization was the kind of chief ideology in Japanese foreign language education policies. But actually, it's also a conservative policy to reflect Japanese national pride, to reflect the national pride of Japan and to spread the Japanese culture globally. So it's kind of a domestication of a foreign culture in Japan. So we see there is a kind of similarity in these two countries. Okay, so analysis for the second point. So we see from the policy documents or the statements that they may reflect a kind of concern over linguistic imperialism, right? Possibly English is still regarded as a Trojan horse. It was apparently beneficial, but actually can be an enemy to Chinese language and culture. And English was regarded as a gatekeeper. So it's a kind of unjustified gatekeeper. So there is a kind of ideology reflected that English or English language culture might disturb the ecology or ecological balance of the Chinese language and culture. And also, at another level, there can be a kind of redefinition of China's global role, because China wants to exert its own role as a major global player in the world system, and therefore it needs to reinforce its cultural identity and the cultural identity of all its subjects. And it's a way for cultural governance. Okay, so we see that by emphasizing the need to cultivate patriotism in English teaching, the state seemed to be promoting the ideology that individuals' identities can be constructed and consolidated by fostering their patriotic nationalism, and teaching English could therefore reinforce state governance, and this in turn creates a desirable societal scenario for cultural governance. Okay, so I am going to talk about the third and the last point that I want to raise today. That is developing students' core competence to improve the foreign language competence of the state. Okay, so the core competence of English subject is a very distinct feature of the current English curriculum standards in China recently. And the elements include English language ability, cultural awareness, thinking capacity, and learning ability. So again, I'm going to give you a few seconds to read what they mean by yourself. Okay, so I would argue that these elements for core competence of English subject are key for China to improve its global competitiveness in the world system. And why do I argue this? If you look at this statement, okay, and you can see, I will just give you a few seconds to read this. As you can see that, well, in the English curriculum standards, well, it's pointed out the global political and economic context, you know, the global multipolarization, economic globalization, and social informatization, right? And then we see that it seems that China as a state realized that the whole state, the whole world is interconnected within one world system, and it's no longer dominated by any monopolies, right, in the world system. But actually, in this interconnected world system, China is facing challenges and facing competitions. Okay, for example, okay, at a super state level, China is short of talents in international organizations. And then at a sub-state level, its local enterprises are encouraged to internationalize, but there are no talents or no one, not enough candidates to be able or subjects to be able to communicate globally, right? And therefore, Xi Jinping put forward that China at the moment is unable to tell the Chinese story well or send the Chinese voice to the world. And hence, another idea was put forward, that is, we should cultivate the foreign language competence of the state. And the core competence of English subject, okay, to improve the students' overall level of English is to say it's not only for the individuals alone, but for the state. And therefore, foreign language planning, we can see that the foreign language planning is closely connected with the development of the state's language competence, with the development of its global governance and also its discourse planning, as well as increasing its global competitiveness. And here I draw the conclusion that the development of the core competence of English subjects will help China communicate in a more global voice and build an international knowledge base for enhancing the state's foreign discourse capacity. The ultimate goal is to make China a competitive core state in the modern world system. Okay, now I reach my conclusion. Mainly, I have shared 3 points with you within this limited time that, well, English is well listed, okay, in the recent English curriculum standard as for communication and for promoting Chinese cultures, right? And English is used as a tool for promoting Chinese language and culture globally. And second, well, in the language policy, we see that English is used for cultivating patriotism. The national identities of the individuals should be and could be constructed and consolidated in language planning. Okay, and then, well, English learning is to develop the students' core competence and therefore to strengthen the foreign language competence of the state. Okay, so lastly, I would like to say that we see from my analysis, I hope I have conveyed successfully the point that foreign language planning in China is a means to exert strict cultural governance, okay, to make China a competitive player in the world system. So we see that the continuity and change in state ideologies towards English and English learning and teaching is closely related to the evolving historical, political, and the economic context of a nation on the international stage. Thank you very much for your interest and for your patience in listening to my presentation. And if you have some further questions, you can just send to me emails. And I hope actually I can join the interactions, but depending on how good my Zoom account could be. Okay, sometimes it's a little bit problematic to connect with you from here. But if I'm not able to join the live interaction, I'm very happy to answer your questions via this email address. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lynn. It's great you could join us overcoming technical problems. So there's a question just here, so we have somewhat time, you can answer. Is there a policy about promoting the understanding and learning of the Chinese language on the international stage?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, it's in the chat if you want to look at it, but I can read it. Is there a policy about promoting the understanding, learning of the Chinese language on the international stage?
Well, is there a policy about promoting and understanding learning of Chinese language on the international stage? I think in general, yes. Well, from the Chinese side, like the Confucius Institute, but still Confucius Institute is problematic in some countries. So it's regarded as a kind of a, China is using kind of soft power to, in kind of a, like a cultural imperialism, though actually, I don't think we were doing it purposefully, but there are some, controversies over this. But I would say promoting Chinese and language could improve. In a way, it's improving our, the Chinese language. That's for sure. Yes. But there is no kind of state, stipulated policies, just no, kind of published policies of this. But it's the general guidance there. Thank you very much.
Let's see if there are any other questions on the question and answer slot, but there aren't here.
Yeah, I see there is a, is there any highlight on mutual understanding and cultural communication? Well, there is a problem on the understanding, on highlight, on mutual understanding and intercultural communication. Well, if you are talking about my analysis of the two policies, yes, I think it's always that while learning of English is to increase mutual understanding and also to be able to communicate with those non-Chinese. Of course, yes, especially this is not only the case for the most current two that I was talking about, but also for the previous, policies. Well, since English is used, especially in recent China, right, after the open door policy in the late 1970s, and also 1980s, English has always been used as a tool to increase global understanding by us, and also to make the world understand us. So that is to increase the mutual understanding and intercultural communication. Yes. Thank you for this question.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay. So It's a great pleasure for us, obviously, that you could join even virtually. And so on behalf of TESOL Italy, I would like to thank you for your presentation, because you shared with us the problem of English learning in China. And the way in which it impacts also from the point of political field. And we also, I also have to thank the 21st Century English Education for making it present possible at the conference. And I would like also to let the attendees know that this year will be a sign, a memorandum of association with the 21st Century English Education for a mutual professional collaboration. And also thank you to all the participants to this session. Okay, the next session will be at 12:45 p.m. And you can also download the certificate of attendance that are available to download from the website at the end of the convention. And don't forget to vote until 7 p.m. today. Okay? So thank you so much, Lynn, for your presence.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, for this session. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak, and also to make it possible for me to meet the audience, to speak the audience as well as to you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You said that the road to happiness was long and winding. You said that the forest would get dark, and that the ground could shift here upon this hill we're climbing. No matter how close we get, we're still so far. But I trust we'll find the clearing. I'm trusting the trail. No matter what we're feeling, there's one way we can't fail. Let's just keep hiking. Let's plant our feet. Let's just keep hiking. Keep hiking with me. Hold my hand, baby. Keep hiking with me. You said the road up to success was an impossible test unless we had some sort of map. And I could feel it in my chest just as our feet begged us to rest. I think this just might be the end of that. But I said I trust we'll find the clearing. I'm trusting the trail.